Meet the Quadra 700, a powerhouse Macintosh from 1991 that pushed Apple's 68K line to new heights with the mighty 68040 processor. The sleek beige tower wasn't just any Mac. It delivered serious performance for advanced tasks like running Jurassic Park security system and crunching computer graphics, and handling the demanding world of desktop publishing and art design. In today's episode, we're taking this vintage marvel to the next level, upgrading its VRAM, installing a new graphics card to power not one, not two, but 3 monitors, including an Apple 2-page display and a Radius pivot, and bringing it online for modern use. So let's go ahead and dive right in on today's episode of Macintosh Librarian Labs. So here we have the beautiful Quadra 700 and its beautiful beige tower. On the back, we have a myriad of ports consisting of, which is the most important port right here, is the Apple AUI port, which allows you to connect an Ethernet jack to your Macintosh to get your Mac online. So we don't have to add a network card. And down here in these blank ports, you'll see that there's room for expandability. Here we can add 2 new bus cards. These new bus cards can add different expansions similar to PCI, but in this case, we're going to be adding some graphics cards. This one right here is the new bus interface card for the Apple 2-page display. So we'll be installing both of these cards in the machine, as well as this beautiful rainbow RAM that I have right here. Hopefully the overhead camera can capture it. This rainbow VRAM that's right here that will allow us to expand our Mac's memory, video memory, to get more colors out of the built-in video, which is accessible through this top port right here. And we'll also be installing this Blue SCSI version 2 into this Quadra 700 and replacing the old spinning hard drive with a SD card. So let's go ahead and hop in it. Like I said, this machine was actually made to where manufacturing was really simple. There's really only one screw involved in putting this machine together, aside from the power supply and the hard drive and stuff. But for the most part, putting it together really only involves one screw. So to take it apart, you just move the little foot down. In reality, I should have 4 feet, but in this case, I only have 2. So yeah, if anyone has some feet for Quadra, feel free to send me your feet. This plastic is actually more on the sturdier side, so not on plastic. So I'm gonna put it over here. Just make sure not to step on it. No step on plastic. Okay, so here we have the inside of our beautiful Quadra 700. You'll see that it is relatively clean, and that's because I have been in here before. What I've done, and I'll show you real quick. I don't wanna blow y'all's ears out, but I do have this really awesome anti-static vacuum. Will allow me to vacuum old computers and suck out all the dust from it without having to worry about causing any, electrical shorts or static discharge on any of the components, causing any damage to any chips or anything like that. So it's highly recommended to pick up one of these, especially if you're a vintage computer collector and you're having to deal with sucking up a bunch of cobwebs from old PCs. So this has been pre-vacuumed, to get all the cobwebs. So in order to upgrade the VRAM of our Quadra 700, what we need to do is get under the hard drive, because that's where the ROM sims are, or the sim slots, as well as the PRAM battery. So we want to make sure that that's been replaced. This was owned by a good friend of mine, and I believe she did replace it. But for now, let's go ahead and get to the main VRAM and RAM area. So starting with pulling out the power supply. All we have to do is pull it out by simply putting your fingers underneath and pulling it up, just like that. This power supply is made by Aztec, And the power supply does seem to be doing well. I haven't noticed any whining or any fan noise, or at least not many major fan noise. So I'm going to not dig into this yet, or at least not in this episode. And we'll set that aside. And you'll see that the power supply simply just connects to the logic board with this Molex connector. Again, this goes back to the simplicity in manufacturing and putting it together, as well as helping us take it apart. By sliding to this catch down here, the power supply simply slots in and doesn't actually need any screws. The case just simply closes in on top of it. So it's probably the easiest power supply installation I've ever done. And also there's no Molex connectors other than this one coming off of it. All the power that goes to the hard drive and to the floppy drive all come out of the logic board itself. So let's put the power supply to the side and let's deal with the hard drive. So the hard drive is being kept in by this little caddy right here. And it might look like metal, but it's actually just a plastic coated in a RF shielded paint, which if you retrowrite some Macs, depending on how gung-ho you go on your peroxide, sometimes this paint can come off, which I'm sure is not great for you. I'm gonna carefully remove this little LED from its little holder right here. Boop. Put that to the side. And then let's go ahead and remove the hard drive wires by just kind of tugging on it on the side and pulling it out. To take out the hard drive, all we need to do is pinch these little brass. I say all we need to do, but this is actually pretty tough. By pinching these little things is actually pretty hard on your fingers, but what you need to do is pinch probably with both hands right here and right here, and it will come out. There we go. It's in this little caddy. As you can see, this Quantum Trailblazer hard drive, I will be backing this up in a later episode. But for now, we'll be replacing it with a blue SCSI. Okay, so now that we have the hard drive out, now you can see this little screw that's down here. This is the only screw that's holding in this plastic caddy that's actually holding in the floppy drive. So once we have the screws out, all we need to do is grab this tab right here, and it should kind of slide that way towards the rear of the case, and then you should be able to pull it out. And here we have the floppy drive underneath the bottom side of the caddy. Okay, so here you can see the blank video RAM SIM connectors. So video RAM allows the Quadra to display higher resolutions and more colors. So with more video RAM, you're able to essentially store more bits of information per pixel. We're going to be using some rainbow VRAM in the 6-stripe apple colors that we got from Silicon Insider. He sells this VRAM on Tindy. This VRAM comes in different colors, as you can see, that match the rainbow aesthetic of the Apple 6-stripe rainbow design. Also, this is 8 nanosecond VRAM. On the store, I believe there is 8 and 10 nanosecond VRAM. I have tried the 10 nanosecond VRAM on this, and I was getting some graphical issues. So 8 nanosecond is recommended for Quadra 700 running a Apple 2-page display. Just FYI. Green should be here. Boop, boop, boop. Can you see that? Yeah. Then orange. Luckily, I have a mat that matches these colors, so I don't have to guess, but I know the colors by heart. So then red, then purple. And because these kind of lean back, you have to kind of put them in this order first, or else it'll be really hard to put in the blue one or the last one if you haven't put in this one yet. And then let's just go ahead and tilt them up so you can see them installed there. So beautiful. All the Apple colors right there. That is amazing. So this will give us 2 megabytes of VRAM. Chunk, a chunk, a chunk, a chunk, a chunk, and a chunk. There we go. They're all in. And checking the RAM, we actually have 64 megabytes of RAM, not VRAM, RAM. That'll give us plenty of memory for this 68040 to run System 7. Okay, so the next thing we need to do is see these 2 slots right here, is install new bus cards in those slots. They're slots that interact directly with the processor. So they offer expandability. So here we have the radius pivot card. Let's go ahead and install it. It's really easy peasy. You just slide it in like that. That's it, so easy. All right, now we have this big chungus boy. This is the Apple 2-page display card. This will allow us to drive a massive 21-inch monochrome display, which is up to a megapixel in resolution. Can't remember the resolution off the top of my head, but I'll put it right here, resolution. All right, so let's install this card. So let's go ahead and install this on the bottom slot. I might have to stand up. There we go. Make sure it's seating correctly, and that's it. And you'll see that there's no screws holding it in place. So what actually keeps these cards in place is kind of an ingenious design idea. Is there's actually little grooves right here on the cover itself that catches the cards, that holds them in place, and that will make sure that our cards don't move whenever we're taking our computer down to Jurassic Park. So here's our beautiful 68040 that's clocked at 20 megahertz. In the front, we have a speaker, and here we have the program and reset button switches right there. So let's go ahead and put the blue SCSI into this little cradle, and then we can get that loaded up. So let's go ahead and install it back in. It's simple. You just kind of make sure that the holes are kind of in the right place and slide it forward, and that clip should clip on. Excellent. So let's go ahead and install our blue SCSI version 2, and I have an SD card that's already loaded with macOS 7.6.1, and that'll be awesome to run on this Mac. It already has some of Mackie's favorite games on it, so it's ready to go. Let's go ahead and use this brass bracket to safely mount, because right now there's nothing here to hold it in. So let's use this brass bracket to kind of hold this blue SCSI in place. Now we just get our brass bracket, put in our blue SCSI like that, and let's line up the hole and go ahead and screw down our 3D printed part. Now, because this isn't a moving part, we don't have to use all 4 screws per se. Now, let's get our Quadra. So let's get a Quadra and just slide in this little brass, make sure it's facing the right way. Slide in this brass caddy like so. And it should just kind of click in place like that. Excellent. Now, let's go ahead and reconnect this Molex power cable and get the SCSI cable installed as well. Connecting the Molex right here, right now. I'm gonna go ahead and put the LED on the middle pin, which is the positive pin. And this is going to the red, which I believe is 5 volts. So hopefully that doesn't blow anything up. We will see. And I'm gonna plop this into there. LED's installed, this wire. So we should get enough power coming out of the SCSI ribbon cable itself, so we don't need, actually this whole ribbon, this whole cable is only powering the LED, which is kind of funny. So I'm just gonna kind of wrap it up and tuck it back right here. That should be good. Pretend you don't see that. Pretend that y'all don't see that mess. Anyway, blue SCSI ribbon cable. SCSI ribbon cable. Let's put that in here and put that there. Awesome. So all we have to do now is install the power supply back on and make sure that this little screw goes back into its place. The one screw that I mentioned, I almost forgot to put it back. That would have been a disaster. There we go. Screw in place. Excellent. Power supply. I don't know why I made a noise. It's not heavy. All right, power supply slides in place just like this. Chook, chook, a-chook. And if you're having some trouble taking your power supply out, you may just be patient with it. It's gonna take time. It probably hasn't been opened in a while, but after you get it out, I would recommend putting a little bit of deoxit onto the connectors and letting it sit for a while. Make sure that the deoxide is pretty dry. You don't want it to arc or anything. You don't want anything to go wrong, but that should help it kind of go up and down easily. Now we have 2 megabytes of VRAM with six RAM sims, VRAM sims, and 64 megabytes of RAM. Let's go ahead and boot it up and see if it works. And old hard drive, I will back you up in the future. So stay tuned, Mr. Hard Drive. I will see you soon. I'll put you right here. You can get protected by Moof. So let's put the lid back on for posterity's sake while we test it. Also, I don't want things to wiggle. Let's get the foot, bend the foot out, put that on. Sometimes your cards may prevent you from putting the case down. Don't force it. What you want to do is, if you have ports on the back of your card, try to grab like that. Here, I'm gonna grab this video port, kind of wiggle it, and just make sure that it sits in that groove and just kind of lets it go in. Let's see. There we go. So sometimes if your card is, or sometimes if your case is having a hard time closing after you installed a bunch of NuBus cards, you may just want to make sure that your NuBus card is seated properly and it should close. You should not force the plastic lid closed. It is just plastic, so it might break. So be very, very careful with your plastic lids. Ooh. Anyway, let's go ahead and test it out. See if it works. Go. Okay, let's see if it boots with the new stuff in it. Memory check has to happen first, and then it should turn on. The screen should turn on at any moment now. There it goes. There it is. Beautiful Mac OS in color. So beautiful. All right, so we got our Quadra 700 booted up, and it does the work, which is really awesome. We have our Apple multi-scan 15-inch display right here with the Sony Trinitron tube inside, displaying millions of colors. Right now we have Photoshop 4.0 loaded up with a beautiful lifelike image of Mackie. It's just like he's here in real life. Oh yeah, he's right behind me. Anyway, so right now he's showing up in millions of colors, only thanks to our 2 megabytes of VRAM that we have installed in our Quadra 700. If we were to have less VRAM installed, we wouldn't be able to achieve such high amount of fidelity in his colors, nor could we increase the resolution on this monitor. And you might be asking, hey Kate, so you installed these 2 extra graphics cards. What are you doing with them? That's a good question, because right now we're not doing anything with them, but give me a second and I'll show you. So here we are at the desk, and now I have the Quadra 700 set up right here, and I have 3 wonky monitors to show you guys. Starting with, oh here, this is the Radius Pivot display. This is actually a color pivot display, but the card that I have is only supporting the monochrome color spectrum, so it can only support 4 shades of gray. Once I get a more up-to-date Radius card, then I can do more shades of color, which would be awesome. But the cool thing about the Radius Pivot is that it can turn, and I will put some B-roll of me turning the Radius Pivot here. And this is the amazing 21-inch Apple 2-page display monitor. You'll see the size difference with this 15-inch Apple color display right next to it. It is so massive. I was lucky to find in VCF 2023, I believe, in Vintage Computer Festival Southwest, a gentleman named Will basically gave me this monitor. His wife didn't want him to take it back home because it's big and chunky, and he gave it to me, which I happily took it back home. This monochrome behemoth was used back in the late 80s and early 90s as a premier desktop publishing monitor. This was a 2-page display, so you could have 2 full sheets of a document, your newsletter, your story that you're typing up about pirates or something, on your monitor at once, all in beautiful paper white monochrome. And right now I have that Apple II-page display card that's running in our Quadra that's actually running this display, running that 13W3 or 3W13, whichever it was, cable. This monitor is really awesome. When I saw it at the show, I immediately fell in love with it because I don't know, it's stupid, it's big, and it's really cool. I did try to do some tweaking to the internals. So this monitor is relatively dim. It probably was used a lot at a print shop or at a school, maybe at a newspaper or something like that. It's an awesome part of my collection. It has a swivel stand. Well, I don't want to swivel it too much because it's next to these other guys right here, but it can tilt, swivel, and rock back and forth, and it's really cool. And it's actually retrobrighted too, so it's nice and platinum white. But look at that, it leans back. It's really cool. Now I can write my stories on it. Anyway, so yeah, those are my cool 2 new monitors, all driven through this one Quadra 700 right here. And this is just a regular 15-inch Apple color display with a Sony Trinitron on it. So what I was showing you earlier, it has really great color representation. This one actually belonged to my friend when I was younger, and his family gave it to me recently. So I'm happy to show it off here and happy to use it here in my studio. So let's get to running some applications and testing the Quadra just to get a sense of maybe its speed and, you know, actually using these wonky monitors a little bit and putting the computer to its paces, putting the computer through its paces. Anyway, let's use it. So now I'm loading Aldus PageMaker and Quark Express on the computer. I have Quark running on the screen. It's trying to load. It might be taking a while because I also have Aldus on this 2-page display right here. And that's definitely taking up a lot of RAM. So we'll see if it runs. So here's a use case example of why someone would actually want 3 monitors. Well, 3 vintage monitors connected to a Quadra 700, at least back in the 90s and late 80s. Now it's more novelty, but I'll show you why it's cool. So on this monitor here, I am photoshopping pictures of Mackie. Let's go ahead and erase the Apple symbol on Mackie. So let's use the clone stamp tool to erase, kind of crudely erase the, and give him an extra floppy drive for fun. Now people will think he's an SE. Now we have Photoshop Mackie, and now we have our newsletter, where it's all about Mackie and Mackie News. Oh, in theory. This is just an example from Quark Express, which is a publishing software that was used for desktop publishing back in the 90s and O's and 80s. So this is the 1929 World Cycling Cup. It's just a demo. But, you know, I could easily, let's say I want to highlight Mackie, and I can just do Control-C, come here onto Quarks, and Control-V, and boom, Mackie's here. Look at that. Look at that. Yes, it's in black and white, but if you were to send this file to somewhere else, or even just drag this screen to the other screen, you'll see that it shows up in color. So all the color information is preserved in the clipboard, even though it's being dithered to match the display color of each of the displays. So like, for instance, this is thousands of colors, it'll show thousands, but this is 4 shades of gray, it'll automatically dither to match that display. So the colors will just kind of drag over, as you'll see here. It will automatically recalculate the colors really fast, and Mackie's black and white. So now I can set the layout of my newspaper or my article and kind of set it up the way I want it to. And then over here, maybe I want to write something more about Mackie, or kind of maybe, this is the front page and then this is the actual article itself. And I want to see how it's going to be laid out in the page of the magazine. Well, I would want to use a single page display. And if I want to switch it and turn it into just a regular display, bear with me for a second. This one does turn. There we go. After a simple turn, well, it should work in theory. This is what happens with old hardware and software. Things sometimes work, but the cat's moved. So if I have the right wire, which is coming in the mail, I should be able to turn this. It's because it's a pivot display. But I'll do a whole episode about pivots because I have 2 of them. And I do want to show them off and talk about the history of them. There's a whole connection to Apple that relates to radius and the pivot that needs to be covered. And I will talk about it soon. Okay, but this is not that video. This is a labs video. So all my stuff is gone. Let's try to restore it. Quarks crashed because it turned. Things happen. Oh well. So another thing that we can do is try playing SimCity. SimCity 2000 is a very demanding game and definitely requires, or definitely is recommended to run on a PowerPC, but it can run on a 68040. So let's go ahead and run it and see if it runs and if it works. So it wants me to switch to 256 colors, which is totally fine. So let's do it. Maxis presents. Let's load a save city. Let's maybe load Centerville. Oh my God, that is full. May have some trouble running this because it's very full. But one thing we can do with the power of multiple monitors is move our tool set over to the other monitor. And yeah, we can also move the monitor or move the game itself to the other monitor, even though technically it's only made for 256 colors. It will try to dither it. It's not recommended. But if I were to connect this monitor to the actual graphics card of the Quadra, it could actually render it. I will be making a follow-up video about this 2-page display and the history behind it, as well as this pivot monitor and the other pivot monitor that I have. So be sure to stay subscribed and stay tuned for that. Thanks for watching today's episode of Macintosh Librarian Labs and watching me upgrade this amazing Quadra 700 to be a triple monitor powerhouse. Yeah, and thanks to all my patrons who made this channel possible, and I will be sure to see y'all in the next one. Bye.